Are we live? Okay. Good evening. I'm Mark Broman, the Executive Director of the Wachiska Audubon Society. Happy New Year to everyone and welcome. Thanks for coming tonight, even though we've got some snow forecast in the next couple hours. We've got about a dozen people in the room for you at home. I know several people called the office today and said they were going to Zoom in tonight, so we're glad you're joining us online. Wachiska is an independent chapter of the National Audubon Society with a geographic area covering 17 counties in southeast Nebraska. You can follow us on our website and on Facebook. I wanted to remind members that we have two new board members this year. We've got a new treasurer, Carol Bodine, and a new director at large, Tom Lynch. So we've got two new board members. A couple announcements. Spring bird seed sale will go online February 1st and will run until March 7th, and the order form will be in the February Babbling Brook newsletter, and then pickup will be in March on the 15th and 16th. And this year we'll have pickup at the Wachiska office, so it won't be the old place. But you'll see all that in the Babbling Brook, and we'll make the announcement at next month's meeting too. So that's coming up starting February 1st. You can start your bird seed orders, and it might be a cold one, so I know next week's going to be cold, so buy your bird seed and keep the birds happy. I also want to let everyone know that we're going to host the bird encounter at the Gear Library on Saturday, February 18th from 10 to 2. There will be activities for kids and families there, so there will be a number of Wachiska members volunteering for that and be there. Spring Creek Prairie has an event this weekend. They're having their New Year holiday open house this Sunday, January 14th from 1 to 4, admissions free. They'll have treats, live music, and activities in the craft room. So it might be a little cool out there, but I'm sure if you get out there, they'll have plenty to do inside. They'll also have some of the trails out open and have some of the people outside. But if you want to stay inside, it sounds like there'll be activities for you. We're collecting new calendars in the office, so we've been getting a lot of them. Of course, at the end of the year, people get several. And we have a member that delivers those to inmates and recent parolees. And so if you've got some of those calendars laying around that you don't use, bring them into the office, and Arliss and I will make sure they get into good hands. So if you've got those laying around, bring them in. Our next board meeting is going to be next Tuesday, January 16th at 7 o'clock via Zoom. Those are open to the public. If you're interested in observing one, get a hold of Arliss or I, and we'll give you the Zoom login. But it's our regular business, our regular monthly board meeting. Let's see, with a small audience today, we're going to ask if anyone's seen any unusual bird sightings. I'm going to kick off real quick. I kind of cheated, though, so I was in Hawaii for a couple weeks. So I did get to see the endangered Nini goose. I got to see him 3 or 4 times out in different places, not just in the zoo. I did go to the zoo, and I saw them there, but I got to see them out in the wild in a couple places. They're not the brightest of the birds. Several people told me that you got to really watch out on some of the roads around the city because they'll walk right across the road right in front of you. So they had these signs, Nini crossings or Nene crossings all over the place. And I thought that was kind of funny, but a local person said, "Oh yeah, we see them all the time, just walking slowly across the road, and they don't get out of the way." And then the other thing I got to see that was kind of rare was the Hawaiian short-eared owl, and it's out during the day. It hunts during the day, so it's kind of strange for an owl. And I saw the first one. I thought it was a snowy owl. It was almost white. I saw it flying across a pasture in the northern part of the Big Island, and it turned out to be a Hawaiian short-eared owl. And then I saw one later too, and usually they're a little more brown, but they do have a lot of white, but they're kind of a molted look. But anyway, so I did get to see those. I didn't get to see any of the creepers. I was hoping to see the creepers, but I guess they've had a large decline in the creeper population. There's several of the creepers with the long curved bills, and so I was at a couple places where they're supposed to be, but a couple people that I talked to that were sort of local birders said that you don't see them very often. You can hear them up in the trees. They're hard to see, but they've had a lot of problems with some disease lately with several of the creepers. So anyway, I'll open it up to if anyone else has seen anything in Nebraska. Someone called the office today and said they had a Cooper's hawk sit in their backyard for an hour. They watched it and it just sat on the ground. So I'm wondering if it maybe didn't get a mouse or something that might have been poisoned. He said it walked around a little bit, but it just stayed there the whole day. He said it hadn't hit his window of the house. He didn't know why, but it stayed out there for about an hour, and they looked out and it was gone. But it was right in his backyard and standing out there. So in the back, what do we have?
Today I saw Cooper's hawk perched near my bird feeder.
Okay, Cooper's hawk.
I got a good photo. I'm pretty sure it was a Cooper's hawk.
Good, okay. He was probably watching that feeder to see who was coming in, seeing where his next meal might be. Anybody else have anything from their bird feeders, anything you've seen along the roads? Well, with a small crowd, that's probably to be expected, but maybe next month, bring your sightings in with you. Just a reminder, these presentations are recorded on YouTube, and you can watch them at a later time. You can watch it live, of course, always, but you can watch the past presentations. And so tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Monica McCorby. And Monica was born in Lincoln and has a BS in Fisheries and Wildlife from the University of Nebraska and a master's degree from the University of Nebraska at Kearney. And in her master's degrees in natural and life sciences. She's worked for the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission for the past 11 years in the education division, and she has a passion for reptiles and amphibians, and that's kind of a rarity. My daughter actually likes snakes, and so that's kind of a rarity for a female that likes the reptiles and amphibians, so I'm glad you're in that field. Tonight, Monica is going to talk about unveiling the beauty of underappreciated birds. So thank you for joining us tonight, Monica, and she'll take questions at the end of the presentation, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Everyone can hear me. This microphone's weird. All right, I'll do my best. All right, so thanks everyone for having me tonight. I know that the weather is kind of undetermined right now, so thanks for coming out in the snow. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit tonight about maybe some underappreciated birds. So I heard Mark kind of talk about what were some sightings and his cool sightings that were in Hawaii and some of the sightings that you've had here in Lincoln or other places around the capital city here. But I want us to really kind of think for a second about, do we really know what birds do? So there's a whole, and I'll get into this in a little bit here, but there's a whole idea of not necessarily checklist driven, but looking at birds and really understanding what they do and watching them. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but we're going to kind of wrap a lot of things up into this today. So we're going to be talking about some birds that you might be like, those are boring, I see those all the time, but we're really going to get into the kind of the nitty-gritty about what are some cool adaptations, survival tactics, how do they increase that biodiversity even here in our ecosystem. So, all right, so I want you all to kind of think really fast here. I'm going to show you a series of pictures, and I'm going to, I just want to gauge your reaction to what you see. So here's my first one. Ooh, I heard an ooh. Does anyone know what bird this is? Yeah, Lewis's woodpecker. So I think it was last year or a couple years ago, there was one at Schramm. I don't know if any of you went and saw that sighting, but this was a big deal. I also want a disclaimer, I am not a bird person. So like Mark said, reptiles and amphibians are my jam. So you all might know way more than I do. But Lewis's, does anyone know what this was? There's been a few sightings in Nebraska. Yeah, frigate birds. We saw these actually this summer. I was in Mexico, and the group that I was with is not naturalist people. They wanted to lay on the beach, and I was looking up and looking down and looking at the geckos and anoles, and I saw these guys, and I was like, wow, frigate birds, that's so awesome. These are the ones with the big bright red chests that they have, the balloon-shaped chests. Does anyone know what this one is? Yeah, trumpeter swan. So every once in a while, people are like, wow, I saw a trumpeter swan. This is so neat. So we do see them quite a bit in Nebraska, a little bit more in the western part of the state. Snowy owl. How many of you guys would love to see a snowy owl? I know people have driven for hours just to possibly get a glimpse of a snowy owl. So yeah, snowy owls. Does anyone know what this one is? Mississippi kite, yeah. So all of these have been either spotted or recorded in Nebraska, and seeing these, I'm sure some of your reactions would be like, wow, I saw this, you're gonna go tell people about it, you're very excited. It makes you feel happy. You're excited about this, you're interested, you're intrigued, what is this bird doing here? All the questions that you have in your mind. All right, so take those reactions, and I'm gonna show you some other birds. So I wanna see your reactions to these birds. Crow, yep. See them all the time. I saw like 10 of them in the parking lot earlier. Yep. Robin, they're here all the time. This is one of the great birds, though, to get children interested in birding. If you ever have taken kids out birding or adults that have not been birding, this is a great bird because it's large and it's fairly slow. It's able to move around, do its thing while people watch it and observe it. So this is a great bird to kind of get those birders interested in bird watching. Yeah. I see like everyone's reaction. It's like, meh. Yep. Pigeon. I don't know what this one is. Coot. Yep. Not everything that's in the water is a duck. A lot of people don't know that. But yes, coots. American coots. Cowbird. Yeah, brown-headed cowbird. So some of your reactions to these might be bored. I've seen them, I've done it, I don't really care about these birds. They're nothing exotic, they're nothing interesting, they're not going to get me a check on my list. So a lot of these birds might kind of make people feel bored. They don't care, they see them all the time, they're very common birds, but they're also very underappreciated birds. So I was mentioning earlier, there was a woman, her name is Joan Strassman, and she actually is from she's a professor of biology at Washington University in St. Louis, and she had this idea of slow birding. So not necessarily like checklist driven, I need to find everything, I want to see the most exotic things out there, I got to go tell people about them, but really diving in and getting insight into the birds that we see all the time and wondering what they're doing. So we know that robins sometimes migrate, and most of the times they stay here. We know blue jays are very smart birds, but what do they actually do that makes them smart? So taking a second and really observing those common birds that you see in your backyards and taking your backyard and making it your own informal laboratory of discovery. So figuring out what these birds actually do and interpreting their behavior. All right, so this idea of slow birding, like I mentioned, it's gaining insight to the circle of everyday birds that we see. So birds, when we break it down, they're some of the closest connections that we have to wild areas or wilderness areas. It's also a great way for people to get started in stewardship. They want to do something outside. They want to take their kids out. This is something that's very simple. Anywhere you go, there's a bird. You don't need a ton of heavy equipment. You don't need expensive equipment. You can have all those things, but you don't have to. So really looking at the wild and making that connection to nature. And also, like I mentioned, that joy of discovery. So being a better observer. So not just understanding, oh, I saw that bird, check, done. But you have to look at that bird. What's it doing? Making your observations very scientific. If you're very interested in doing it, there's a lot of community science projects that you can do, not just for children, but for adults as well, where you can watch birds in your backyard 15, 20 minutes a day and record your observations for scientists and helping them figure out what birds are we seeing? What do we see here? What are they actually doing? And then also there's a payoff. So like I mentioned, it's not checklist driven. It's not finding the most exotic and filling your list. It's really, which kind of feels competitive at some point. I know I am not a birder. Birds are fine. Reptiles and amphibians are kind of my thing. So everyone else is looking up. I'm looking on the ground. But when you're around a lot of bird people, it sometimes does feel competitive. Sometimes a lot of people have said it's almost a barrier, that it's not inclusive. A lot of people that are so good at listening for birds, I remember I was talking to one guy in the middle of a conversation. He goes, oh, there's a blah, blah, blah over there. There's a da-da-da over there. And I'm like, I didn't even hear these birds. So it sometimes feels intimidating. So we want people to love birding. We want people to get out there and observe birds. So more isn't always best, but we really want to gain that insight into those common birds. All right, so tonight I want to highlight just a few common birds that we'll see here in Nebraska. I understand that a lot of you probably know most of this information, but I do want to dive into some things that you might not know about these birds. So all these things I want to talk about, so survival tactics, how they add to that biodiversity, their role in the ecosystem, and maybe just some fun facts that you don't know about. All right, so one of the first ones is that house sparrow. Raise your hand if you've seen a house sparrow. Hopefully everyone has. Okay, every time I go to get coffee, there's those big evergreen trees, and they're so loud, sometimes it's hard to order coffee. So we see them quite a bit. A lot of people know that they are invasive species. They have been contributed to kind of driving away a lot of different types of birds, but they displace those native birds. People sometimes call them undesirable birds. I remember I was in the wild bird habitat store, and I heard Dave Titterington say undesirable birds. So grackles, sparrows, some of those things that you don't really want to see. They're frequent visitors to backyards, though. They're everywhere. So people see them all the time. There's that constant presence of sparrows. All right, so what sometimes people don't know, they do take frequent dust baths. So a lot of times they will throw, not water, but dirt, dust on themselves, just like they were in a bird bath, and they are very territorial. They will actually defend that area. One of the things that they also do is it kind of shows how people and birds have become almost one. So it's something where people are in areas, we have more people than ever on the planet, and a lot of these birds have adapted over time to almost thriving with people. I'm not sure if sparrows would be one of those birds that could do well without people. So we don't want to see that with every bird, but this would be one of them. They're also a very good organism for studies. This is the #1 most published bird. So there's about 5,000 papers specifically on human and bird connections, on birds and biological needs, everything, anything about sparrows. This is like the #1 suspect, I guess, that people use. So they want to learn more about birds. This is something that they look at. So we might not have a ton of information because people couldn't watch sparrows. So 5,000 papers have been published by looking at a sparrow. They're also pretty aggressive when they defend their nest. A lot of people put up nest boxes for different types of birds. This is one that will actually drive some of those birds away. And they do have a pecking order. So if you can look, the little spot on their chin, that black patch, usually if you watch very closely, if you do that slow birding, if you watch, the ones that have the larger, blacker patches, those males are usually older, they're a little bit more dominant. So they have a pecking order very similar to chickens. The ones that are a little bit younger and still have a lot to learn, they will have a little bit smaller of a black patch on them as well. All right, pigeons. Everyone's like, why are you talking about pigeons? But pigeons, very common. We see them just about everywhere. They have a lot of different colors. I know anywhere in Nebraska or Lincoln, when you drive, you see them sitting on telephone poles. There's white ones, black ones, multicolored, iridescent looking ones. They were introduced to North America from Europe in about 1600s. They do come to feeders every once in a while. They'll pretty much eat anything. And then also pigeons, a lot of people consider them pests. A lot of areas, I don't think in Nebraska, but in some larger cities, they do have ordinances about feeding them because obviously they congregate and they gather. But in addition to those colors, there is a community science project that has looked specifically on the different colors of pigeons and understanding how birds have certain colors and why they have those certain colors. So some of the things you might not know is that they produce milk. Very different than mammal milk that you had when you were a baby or that a mammal gives to their baby. We call it crop milk. So this is one of the birds' very specialized cells make up this milky substance that right after the male and female will both produce this, right after they lay their eggs, what we'll do a couple days later, they start producing this milk in their crop, and then both parents will actually feed their babies, their squabs, this milky substance. So it's very nutritious. It has antioxidants and immune boosters in it. Basically helps subsidize those babies until they are able to go on their own. Once those babies are done drinking the milk, they will stop producing that as a parent. And then also, flamingos and penguins also do this too, but pigeons are one that in Nebraska we see this. All right, another invasive bird. This is also another bird. It's one of the most asked about birds. A lot of times people will send Game and Parks pictures, hey, can you help me identify this bird? This is one that is probably the most requested. They have no idea what it is, but they do know that it's pretty. And even though they are invasive, I think we can all agree that they are pretty birds. They're very iridescent. They have all these cool colors on them. They were brought to North America by Shakespeare enthusiasts. They could not live without them here in North America, so they brought them here, about 100 birds, and now, you know, we have millions and millions and millions of these birds. So oftentimes they are resented because of there's so many. They poop on things. They're considered a nuisance. They do, I can't remember the exact disease that they carry, but when a lot of them poop and congregate with another, there's a disease that you can get from them if you inhale that. So a lot of people don't like them. There's also extremely little genetic variation, which you would never notice because all the birds look rather healthy for the most part. But there was a study done where they took a starling from California and a starling from Virginia, and they looked at them, and their genes were pretty much identical. It was very, very difficult to tell them apart. So very little genetic information or variation from them, but because 100 birds made the flock that we have now. So again, very small genetic individualization. All right, something that people don't know is that they're great vocal mimics. So just very much similar to blue jays, they can make lots of different sounds. They've learned up to about 20 different calls. This includes things as killdeer, meadowlarks, northern bobwhite, wood thrush, red-tailed hawk, American robin, northern flicker, and many others. They can also taste. They're one of the few birds that actually can taste different things. They can tell the difference between cane sugar and table sugar. They can tell the difference between a tannin, if anyone knows what that is. They can taste salt, and they can also taste citric acid. So they've done a lot of studies where these birds can actually taste different things. Very similar to how humans have different taste buds, these birds do as well. And then something else that's also very unique is their large murmurations, or this gathering of these birds. So oftentimes people will see them in the fall. There are these large congregate assemblies of all these birds. Sometimes there's been more than 100,000 birds in a single congregation, or that single murmuration. No one really has an explanation about exactly why they do that. There's theories. One of the theories is, especially in the winter, it's warm, especially a day like today. If all those birds are flying around, they roost together, it congregates more birds, and they're able to produce that body heat. Another thing is that delusion effect. So basically, if you have all these birds, you confuse predators. If a predator comes to grab one bird, they see all this huge murmuration of starlings, and they're like, nope, I think I'm going to be okay. That looks way bigger than I am. So it's one of the things that people mostly think is why they do that. But how do they do that is pretty interesting. If you know anything like a school of fish, they go off of each other. So every 6 or 7 starlings looks at their neighbor of 6 or 7 starlings, who looks at their neighbor of 6 or 7 starlings, and they go off of each other. So they move and they twist and they make those shapes based off of each other. Basically, this optimizes the cohesion of them. So if one of those would get out of line, it would mess up the rest of the flock. That was it. I do have a video, and I don't know, Linda, if you have to push play on that, or if I can push play. There's no sound, but hopefully it plays. It worked earlier. Yeah, so here you can see, if you've never seen a murmuration, you kind of know what I'm talking about here. There's no sound, but you can just see how they twist and turn together. There's a lot of cool shapes. If you look up or Google search starling murmurations, there's different shapes. It's almost like clouds. Like what shape can you see in all the starlings? If you go back and watch earlier, there's like one large bird off to the right-hand side over here, and then there's a couple birds like flying through, and I'm sure they're like, what is happening? But yep, so that was it. It's just a video of their murmurations and how they twist and move and turn together. All right, crows. This is one that everyone's familiar with. You see them, you hear them. This might be the reason, I guess, birds aren't my favorite. When I was 5, I fell off my bike in this pile of like green, oily mud. And I swear there's a crow that was laughing at me. It was cawing at me. For some reason, that kind of has stuck with me for 34 years. So that might be one of the reasons birds aren't my favorite. But they do hold grudges. They're good at problem solving. They're capable of conscious thought. So all these birds, people see them all the time. They're one of the smartest things around. A lot of times what people think, scientists believe, is that when mammals and apes kind of arrived in evolutionary history, crows and corvids kind of arrived at the same time about 5 to 10 million years ago. And they believe that their tool use kind of evolved together. So even though the largest corvid or any of these crows, jays, anything, their brain's the size of a walnut. That's the largest it's going to get. That's a very large bird. Obviously, people and primates have larger brains, but relative to their body size, they're very similar to each other. So these guys, they don't typically visit feeders, as I'm sure you noticed. They're usually in parking lots, grabbing that garbage or things that people leave behind. but they are capable of tool using. So these New Caledonian crows, they're capable of using these amazing tools. They will strip off bark and different leaves. They will bend and twist a stick to make it into a crevice as much as they need to. They also are capable of solving complex problems. They remember human faces, and they hold grudges against people. There's been studies where people will go and grab a bird and tag it, and what will happen is birds will remember that dangerous person. That's what the article called it, a dangerous person, because you were the one that grabbed that bird and tagged it. They followed this group of birds for about 3 years, and they passed on that grudge. So every time that person would come around, they would mob that person and alarm call that person. So they were able to remember their face and also what they did to that bird and pass it on for generations. So they're very smart. A lot of people don't give them credit. They also hold funerals for the dead crows. There was a couple studies done where someone walked around parking lots with a taxidermied crow, and they would like put it down and then walk away and see what would happen. Those crows would come down and kind of inspect what was happening, trying to visualize if there was danger to them. They would also alarm call. So when they went back up to roost, they would call an alarm call around them, that caw, caw, caw around them. They also understand the concept of zero. So I have a almost 5-year-old. She probably does not understand that. That's a very hard concept for kids under 7 to understand, is something that's zero or not there. They found that crows understand what zero means. There's nothing there. And then also something they've been seen doing is memorizing traffic colors and what they mean. There's a lot of birds that will want to crack open nuts. So they wait for the light to turn red. They fly down, drop the walnuts or whatever what they're trying to crack, and then as soon as the light turns green, they fly away. The cars run over it. They crack it open. When the light turns back red, they come down and grab it. So pretty amazing for a bird to understand green means go, red means stop. A lot of humans don't understand that when they're driving. So for them to do that, that's pretty impressive. They've also been noted at memorizing garbage pickup schedules and restaurant opening and closing times to find the best foraging as well. So when a restaurant opens, they know that food's going to come out. At the very end of the night, they throw the trash away, and that's when they come and congregate and gather to forage. So pretty impressive. All right, this is my most favorite bird. Like I mentioned, not a bird person, but this is my most favorite bird in the entire world. Turkey vultures, they're very common. A lot of people consider them pests. Folklore has kind of associated them with death. A group of them is called a wake. Like a bunch of crows is called a murder. These guys are called a wake. They see them as ugly, filthy, stinky. They carry lots of diseases. People clearly don't know turkey vultures then. So a few things that people don't know is that they're one of the few birds that have that sense of smell. They can smell in parts per trillion. So when you see them circling and flying around, it's not an omen of death or someone that's going to die or something that is going to die. It's simply them trying to find and hone in on that smell. As a defense mechanism, they will vomit on something. One time I was at the Crane Trust used to put on a crane festival, and I remember when I first started, I went out there and they had a turkey vulture sitting on someone's arm, and they said, okay, you kids can come up and inspect the turkey vulture. Please don't run up to them though, they get scared. One of the kids didn't listen, ran up to the turkey vulture. Turkey vulture was fluttering around and then puked on the kid. So I'm sure he learned his lesson to listen. But it does happen. They have strong stomach acids. They can digest just about anything. And a cool study came out a couple years ago about them and what they contribute to society. So people are very egocentric, like how can this help me and how does this help me? So turkey vultures, they estimated that each turkey vulture does about $1 million in cleanup yearly. So if you think about all those turkey vultures out there and all the people that go around on the roadsides and pick up those dead animals or scrub or clean off that stuff for diseases, these guys are doing it for us, which is pretty impressive. They also, when they eat those carcasses, they have strong stomach acid. They can eat things that are carried with rabies or littered with tuberculosis or anthrax and be totally fine. They have such strong stomach acid, it does not bother them. All right, these are one that a lot of people have considered they don't like. They are native birds, they're not invasive, but those brown-headed cowbirds, we know what they look like, they're very common, but instead of building their own nest, they produce more energy into making eggs, and then they put those eggs in other birds' nests. They do displace a lot of birds. They have been known to be a nuisance and also have contributed to the decline of a lot of different types of threatened and endangered species. It's been noted. However, what they do is kind of interesting. So one of the studies that people ask is if they're putting their eggs in another bird's nest, how does that cowbird know to be a cowbird? If the mother doesn't raise them, they don't learn those calls, how does this happen? Well, they did studies. Like teenagers, sometimes they sneak out at night. So they sneak away from the nest. Usually teenagers go to a party or go with their friends. These guys, when they sneak out at night, they go with their family members. They go to meet their family members in the middle of the night. So what they do is they go meet their family members. They mingle with some new and other cowbirds. They learn how to be cowbirds. They get the calls down. They understand the body language. And then they go back to their nest during the day. So they're sneaking out at night to meet with their family members to learn how to be a cowbird. So that's kind of how people have determined that that's how they learn to be a cowbird and know their species calls without actually being raised by their mom. Their mother also doesn't completely abandon them. She kind of watches over a little bit, but she also learns, if this was not a good fit, I am not going to put my eggs over here again. So it is interesting for them to learn all of this stuff and to be cowbirds. All right, cardinals. This is one, again, that's gets a lot of people to bird, and it's one of the things that scientists contribute to getting people to open up a field guide more than any other bird. So the striking red is very common, or is not very common in the pigment of the world. But I do remember one time we had a conference here at Spring Creek Prairie, and a bunch of people from all over the United States were here. And I remember we saw a cardinal, and someone tapped my shoulder and said, "Did you see the cardinal?" And in my head, I was like, yeah, I see them every day. Like, what's the big deal? They were very excited. They lived way out in California. They don't have cardinals. So to see this was like for them to check off something on their list. It was very unique. All right. These guys also, you're going to see them at a feeder. They're everywhere. But one thing people don't know is where do they get their plumage color? It's actually from their food. So their food has carotenoids in it, which makes their pretty color. Female birds, cardinals, are a little less dull or a little less bright. They're a little more dull. And they are more vocal for those North American songbirds. So they're one of the few female songbirds that are actually very vocal compared to the males. They're also pretty protective of territory during their breeding season. Cardinals become obsessive on keeping their territory and other animals away from their territory. They have been known to fight with their reflection in a mirror or a window for hours, thinking that it is a different bird trying to get into their territory. One thing I didn't mention is in the crows, taking this to the crows, they know their own self and they know their reflection in the mirror. So they would be one of those birds and be like, oh, that's just myself. I'm not going to worry about it. Cardinals are not quite there yet. All right, mourning doves. This is my daughter. She's almost 5. This is her favorite bird. She came home the other day and said, Mom, I saw a mourning dove on the playground, and we talked about it. She knows how to do the call. She thinks it's very interesting. So not everyone thinks that, though. They are pretty common. One of the neat things a lot of people don't think about is they make that whistling or that whinnying sound when they take off. Their wings will make that really cool sound. But they're very common at platform feeders. They're a little bit stockier and larger of the birds, so they need something to hold on to like a platform and not necessarily those hanging feeders. These guys will stockpile seeds. So a lot of times when you see a mourning dove, the breast will enlarge and kind of open and contract. This is them stockpiling those seeds in something called a crop. So very similar to those pigeons that produce that crop milk. These guys will as well. They're pretty much in the same family, pretty much the same birds. So they also produce that milk in the crop as well. These guys, they had one bird that they found that had 17,200 bluegrass seeds stuffed away in their crop. 17,000 seeds, so little bluegrass seeds stuffed in their crop. So when their breast expands, it is a lot because they had 17,000 seeds in there. There is another bird. A lot of people get kind of confused, and it's invasive, the Eurasian collared dove, which looks kind of similar to the mourning dove. It's a little bit larger. They have this collar around them. I don't think they're as pretty. And when they make a noise, it's not that pretty, ooh, wah, ooh. It's more like a crow call. So if you hear one of those birds, it's like that, a lot of times they sit on telephone poles and wires. It's these invasive birds. So they drive away other birds. They carry diseases, all the things that invasives do. But a lot of people get those two confused with each other. All right, another corvid here in the Corvidae family. These blue jays, very common, very large birds that you see. They're known for their intelligence and their complex social systems, very similar to a crow. They're in the same family. They have a fondness for acorns, as a lot of you may know. They're most detected by their noisy calls. They prefer tray feeders or hopper feeders. And then they are the 6th most Googled bird in the world, 6th. And then is anyone familiar with eBird? Some of you might be familiar with eBird. They are the 5th most reported on eBird. So they are another bird that a lot of scientists contribute to getting people excited about birding. Blue jays, one thing a lot of people don't know, there's actually no such thing as a blue bird. So if you would take one of their feathers or you take the bird and you backlight it from the back, it's going to appear brown. So it is the way that our eyes see and lack of absorption, I guess, in the colors. So when light is reflected, all the colors are absorbed except the blue color, which is refracted. So that is why we see the blue color. But again, if you take a blue jay feather and you backlight it, it's going to be brown because of the melanin in there. So blue pigment is very rare in nature. Same thing with like a blue bird or a blue jay or any of those blue colored birds. These guys are actually really good mimics as well. They can mimic red-shouldered hawks, red-tailed hawks, cats. People in captivity have even trained them to talk like a person. Not very often does that happen, but I've read a couple reports about that as well. But they can make a variety of sounds. A lot of people believe that blue jays are aggressive, and sometimes they will do this to bully other birds into thinking there's a predator, and they all fly away, and then they run down or fly down and eat all the food on their own. So it's one of those reasons that blue jays will do that as well. All right, mallard ducks. These are, again, one that a lot of people see. They're the most hunted species of all domestic ducks come from the mallard ducks. These guys, they are very likely to accept handouts from people. A lot of people don't know that ducks, males, don't actually quack. It's the females that make the quacking noise. Males make more of like a raspy sound when you hear them. What people don't know is their reproductive anatomy is quite interesting. So with ducks, they have interesting phalluses, and then females, they have vaginal tracts that are spirals and sacs and crevices that add to this complexity. With ducks, there's been a lot of forced copulation, so it's kind of an evolutionary arms race. Males try to mate with the females. Females don't want it, so their body changes, and over time, an evolutionary develops to not fit a duck male. So males will have a corkscrew-shaped phallus. Females have an anti-corkscrew-shaped vaginal tract. So basically they, and if it does happen, when the male will ejaculate into the female, there's little holes and crevices that it will just run back out. So over time, they have changed their anatomy to not fit the male mallard duck. All right, and then coot. Again, not everything that floats is a duck. Coots are actually really interesting birds. They have this like scrawny looking head. A lot of people think they're related to ducks. Truth is they're more related to sandhill cranes. They have these long, big, thick legs. If you ever watch them take off, they're like frantic when they take off. But they do have a lot of ecological impacts as well. These guys, they're little babies. No one knows what a coot baby looks like. It's this bright, like, spiky yellow orange thing. So what these guys will do is they have a culling of their babies. So basically they have all the babies. The mom and dad won't really feed them until they see which one is their favorite. They pick favorites. I guess we all have a favorite kid. So what they will do is they'll pick one of their favorites, ones they don't think will survive, and start feeding that one. And then the other ones are kind of on their own. And if they die, well, I laid a bunch of eggs. I will have some survive and some won't survive. So they purposely lay more than they know will survive. Also, if you go back here, their feet are super cool. If you've ever looked at their feet, they have this really cool palmate looking texture, and they're lobed. So when they walk, they're able to stand on marshy, kind of wet grass and land, whereas ducks are very awkward on land. These guys are a little bit better, but they have these super cool feet that help them move around. All right, I think it's my last one. So red-tailed hawks. So this one I feel like is a very cool bird to see no matter what, but they are quite common, especially in Nebraska. If you want to see one, just take a drive. They'll be on a fence post, they're in the cities, they're everywhere. So they're very numerous, especially in the wintertime. Those birds from the far north will come down and join the ones that we have here. A lot of people think they're heavy by just looking at them, but the largest female is only going to weigh about 3 pounds. So a lot of that is just the feathers. But their mating and courtship is very interesting. So these guys, the male will actually approach the female in hopes to mate. If she thinks that's going to be okay, what they will do is they'll go off really high, up to 1,000 feet. They'll sometimes lock talons. They will get together, and they just free fall. When they're ready, they break through the ground, and they dive at speeds about 100 miles or more. And then what happens is the female will touch down. If the male comes over and she thinks that's okay, they will start to mate. They will also, they're adapted for life in the air, and they will also usually mate for life. They will build a nest together in hopes that they can, it's like a date. They will build their nest together in hopes of mating and having eggs afterwards. Okay, so why is this so important? Why do we care about these birds? We see them all the time. Again, what's the point? So we want to make birding inclusive. So I remember one time when I started doing a nature camp with kids, I was kind of observing, and I was watching someone else do this, and there was this kid that was super excited about a crow. And I remember this lady goes, "It's just a crow, don't worry about it." And the kid was not excited anymore about birding. So if they're excited about a crow, they're excited about a sparrow, let them be excited about a sparrow. So planning when you're doing a birding out or anything like that, you want to have this welcoming and inclusive environment for everybody. If you're beginning, you don't really know where to go, what to do. You don't have to know everything about birds. You're just out there as the first step. During the pandemic, a lot of people turned to bird watching as something to do and something to do with families. And then if you're going throughout this program, believe someone when they say they see something. If they say they saw a cardinal, believe that they saw a cardinal. Don't correct them. If they say they saw a penguin in the middle of Pioneers Park, we might need to rethink that. But thinking about, don't randomly call out birds that not everyone knows around them. It's very off-putting, and a lot of people, that makes them not want to go bird watching. So in the end, make people want to keep birding. Help guide information about what's next. Okay, there's this community science project that you can do, or there's a birding outing coming up, or I just heard Mark say that you guys have that program coming up at your library. That's something to get people interested in birds as well. Birding can be for everybody. All right, and so it also, education in birding is a long-term conservation tool. First step is raising awareness. A lot of people do not know birds, and if they do know birds, it's the ones that I've kind of talked about today. Second one is enhancing that knowledge. So once you grab them and they're excited about birding, now enhance that knowledge and that awareness of them. And then the third one, if people are interested in birds and they're doing something, they are more likely to take action. They're more likely to sign a petition. They're more likely to go out and take other people bird watching. They're more likely to do community science projects because they feel comfortable. Doing those broad impacts really do make a difference. All right, and then forget money. Birds are the key to happiness. There's studies about it. There's a study out a couple years ago. They literally say, don't think about money, think about birds. Birds are what makes you happy. So bird watching, like I mentioned, it bloomed during the pandemic. A lot of people turned to bird watching as something to do. It keeps us happy. It makes us feel calm and hopeful. Birds also signal seasonal change and hope. So a lot of people have seasonal depression, especially during this time of the year when there's not a lot of light. This gives them something to measure and hope for. They're excited to see new birds coming to the feeders. And then birds also remind us to take care of nature. We've lost about a third of our bird population in the past 50 years. So a few active service alleviates those symptoms and hopefully comes to our overall well-being. So we want to take care of birds. We're excited about birds because we have that connection with them. All right, that's all that I have. But are there any questions?
I'll bring the microphone around. I understand we were in the back trying to work on some technical difficulties, so some of the folks at home weren't able to log in, unfortunately.
no. Okay.
It will be taped, and we'll get that
Sounds good.
site out to folks so they can log in and see the whole presentation. So questions, I've got the microphone. I'll just pass it around. So the few folks that are at home logged on, there are some folks who were able to get on. They had to go through YouTube and get logged in tonight. So you're lucky you came tonight. Otherwise, you'd have to wait and watch it afterwards. Have any questions out there? Tim, here we go.
This is a question I should know, but has there been an adequate exploration of the relationships between the different birds using DNA research? And I know that for a long time it's based on form and so forth, but how about the DNA?
That's a good question. I'm not sure about the DNA. Are you talking about specific birds in general, or you have a specific bird in your mind?
Just in general.
Just in general? Okay.
I
I'm
think-
not sure about DNA, but I do know that pretty much every year they find different relationships between those birds and the different types of birds, and they're constantly changing which birds go where. So I'm not sure about the DNA, though.
And the related question is, there are a fair number of birds, I think, that are not related genetically, but
Yep.
have undergone parallel evolution.
Yes.
And it's kind of interesting to determine that, especially
It is.
vultures and so.
Yes, it is. It's a very interesting relationship. A lot of like mammals will have that too. So yes, you're correct.
Any other questions? Yeah, you have a question, Gerald? Here we go.
We were talking about this on the way down. Do you have any idea, the juncos, before a snowstorm, they're just so good at predicting when it's going to hit. You see them outside and you say, oh, shoot, it's going to snow in a few hours, and you got any
Sure enough.
idea? It's like they fall out of the sky with the snow. Are
With the
they
snow?
waiting just outside of the storm, or what's the deal on that?
I think they can predict those pressure changes like other people. I'm not sure if there's any like folklore about that, but I think birds and other animals know when something's coming, when the changes, the pressure's changing, the temperature drops. I think they know something's coming.
They must, because
Yeah.
they never fail, it seems
Yeah.
like.
It's like those old wives' tales. A lot of people talk about birds and different types of animals. If you see them, I always told that if you hear a mourning dove, it's going to rain. I mean, I hear mourning doves every day, but that's a little bit different than the juncos. But
Well, I'm sure Monica will stick around for a few minutes afterwards and answer some questions. We've got refreshments and cookies here for those in the audience and those of you at home. Thanks for joining us, and thank you very much, Monica.
thank you very much. Yeah.